Hi, this is David. Today we're going to talk about Microsoft Cognitive Services. Cognitive Services are a set of APIs that allow you to take advantage of machine learning without having to do the heavy lifting that often is involved in machine learning. Now, these are simple, there are free versions, there are inexpensive versions, and they're all available here if I go to microsoft.com/cognitive. That'll redirect me to a longer URL right here. And from here, you can see the broad categories: vision, knowledge, language, speech, and search. I'm going to dive into vision just to show you the capabilities of this. I'll use computer vision right here. And if I click on that, you can see, actually I'll go back a little bit and see that just under vision alone, we also have video indexer, custom vision, content moderator, face. So there's quite a few of these things available to you. I'll dive into computer vision right now, and that allows you to analyze an image. It comes back with lots of images. All I have to do is call a web service, send it an image, and all sorts of information will come back right here. For example, for this image right here, there are tags like there's an array of a train, platform, station, building, indoor, subway, all that stuff that's relevant to this picture of a train running through what appears to be either a subway station or an indoor train station. And there's even a text right here: people waiting at a train station. And there's a confidence level. You'll see a lot of this that says it's 83.3% sure that in fact this is people waiting at a train station. There's under here's more tags with confidence levels for each one. Platform, 99.5% sure of that. Station, 97.98% sure of that. Information about the image itself: it's a JPEG. That's the size of it. It's not clip art. It's not a line drawing. It's not black and white. It's not adult content or racy content, which indicates that whether or not it's dirty pictures, which is would be really useful if you had a website that allowed users to upload their own images, and then that website displayed those images. It might be useful to detect whether or not there's any kind of adult content in there before you decide to automatically display them. Maybe you want to hold off on displaying, have a human vet them, or maybe delete them. You decide yourself. But it's given a score here for adult and racy. I think the difference is that a racy score just means that it's a high racy score means that it shows some skin, whereas an adult score would actually be maybe some pornography, for example. More categories here. There are no faces in this one, but I could come back. The color information, all sorts of information about this. And you can see it looks pretty accurate for this one. Here's a black and white picture of a city. Tags: outdoor, city, building. A black and white photo of a city. It's a JPEG. Down here you see black and white is true in this case. Here's a line drawing, actually a lion drawing. That is a line drawing. And this one I find is interesting because it's in here and it found the wrong thing. It said a drawing of a face. It guessed this is a drawing of a face, but it knew that it wasn't very sure. It gave it less than 50% confidence that that's what it was. So you get information back, and you can do with it what you want, but you can decide a lot of that information, what you do with it, based on how confident is it that it is what it thinks it is. In this case, there's the clip art type and the long drawing type. Those are actually not false right there, and it's black and white, etc. Here's an example of one with faces in it. If we look at this and scroll down to the faces, here we go. Now we don't get this empty array which we did in the last ones. We actually get faces and information about each face in here. 43-year-old male, and there's a rectangle. Top, left, width, and height. That information comes back for every single face in here. And somebody's written some JavaScript so that it drew an actual rectangle around these coordinates. And if you hover over it, then the age and the gender actually display over each one as you hover over. That's all written with JavaScript based on this information that came back. Now, the information doesn't come back exactly like this. Somebody also has written some code to format it really nicely in this table. What it comes back is as JSON. And I can show you right here that here's another example. This one also in computer vision. Read text and image. This is optical character recognition. And so if I have something like this: sorry, have a nice day, oops, blah, 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 and all that, you can see that it did a pretty good job of figuring this out. But this isn't what came back. What actually came back is this JSON. And here's the JSON right here. JSON is JavaScript Object Notation. It's a nice, really compact format for delivering data over the internet, and it's nice and structured, but it doesn't have a lot of wasted characters and so on. So it has things like curly braces to indicate hierarchy and grouping things together. It has this arrays are defined by these brackets right here, so in this case they have things like Yes, it was a success. It recognized, it broke things up into an array of lines, and each line it broke up into an array of words, and each word it broke up into an array of, I guess that's about it. So on here, what we can do is parse this out, and they actually did this. They parsed that out and displayed it as something like that. Handwriting messages, it does something similar for that. Recognizing celebrity, here's Satya Nadella, it's my boss's 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 boss, and it recognized there's a celebrity in there. His name is Satya Nadella, and there's where his face is. It's 99.9999% sure that it is in fact Satya. That's probably the first one they analyzed. And there's video analysis in here, and generating a thumbnail is in here also. So all sorts of things that you can do with this computer vision. Now, if you want to get started working on it, there's some helpful links right here. This is just a demo of what it can do, how to do it. One place you could look is documentation, and in here you'll see things like, a broad overview of what it does, some of the concepts that are important. Here's some quick starts right here. It's just a REST API. You make a web service call, you send it either an image, a raw image, or a link to an image, and you send it over HTTP, and you get a response back over HTTP. That response is JSON. You can parse it out. If you want to use some SDKs, there is a .NET SDK, and there's some information in here on how to use that. Here's some tutorials that'll help you to walk through that. And these are all pretty interesting. I would recommend using them. But if you're a software developer and you want to get down into the nitty-gritty, what you want to do is go to here, this API link, and the API link actually tells you how to call this REST API. And so for every single one, let's start with the one that we were just looking at, the computer vision API, the one that would look at the picture of the train station or the faces or the city or the line drawing, etc. That example here, that's done through a web service called a REST API. REST is just a simple way of making an API call over HTTP and getting some information back about that, or performing some action on the other end about that. In this case, we're just getting information back. And here's the API right here. We'll send it to an endpoint, an HTTP endpoint. It'll be https:// something. Something will be the region. It's right here. So if the region was Western US, it'd be https:// westus.api.cognitive.microsoft.com/vision. So we know which API it's going to call, computer vision API, /v20/analyze. That's the exact API that we're going to call right here. So it's version 2 of the under vision, and it's the analyze thing. And then there's some query string parameters that we can add to the end of that. For example, there's visual features. If we set $visual features equals something, then it'll tell it some more information about how to behave. And each one of these query string parameters, visual features, details, and language, is described right down below here. So under visual features equals, we can give it a comma delimited list of the features that we want this API to return about the image. Do we want the categories, the tags, the description, the array of faces and information about each face, the image type, is it JPEG, and so on, the color, do we want the adult and racy content in here? If we don't want this, then we just don't put that in that comma delimited list of visual features, and we'll get a smaller packet of JSON back. It might even run a little faster, I'm not really sure. But we specify that with this. The next one is details. It's details equals, and that's a comma delimited list of celebrities, comma, landmarks. So if you want to detect celebrities, you add celebrities to it. If you want to detect landmarks, you add landmarks. If you want to detect neither, you just omit that entirely. And then language would be the language of the description of the tags that came back. Currently, only these four are supported: English, Japanese, Portuguese, and Chinese. Hopefully they'll do more later on. I'm not really sure what the plan is for that. So those are the query string features. That's the URL. You can construct that URL, and if you see at the top here, it says I want to post. So with HTTP, you have the option of either posting or getting or putting and so on. There are a finite number of verbs that we use. In this case, post is the one that we'll want to use. So we'll post to this URL. And then with HTTP, we always have headers that we can add. And here are the headers that you can add. One is the content type. I'm going to come back to that in a second. And the other is the OCP APIM subscription key. And to do this, you need to go into Azure. And when we go into Azure, I'm going to do that right now. We'll say create a resource group. We'll create a resource. And we'll get this resource under AI and machine learning computer vision right here. And I'm going to call this one GCast C Vision for computer vision right there. All right, I'll put it in the West US. You can see the pricing tiers. There's a free one or a cheap one. I only get to have one free one, so I'll do the cheap one right here. And I'll put it in a resource group. I'll actually create a brand new resource group called GCast C Vision RG. How about that? Okay. And then I'll click on create, and that's it. The difference between the free one and the cheap one is, beyond the fact that the free one is actually free, is that you get a limit on the free one. The limits have to do with the number of calls per minute and the number of calls per month. So if you want to have something that's going to run in a tight loop, or you want to have something that you're going to deploy out to the world in an iPhone app, you probably won't want to use a free one. But if you're just testing things out and want to learn how to use this, the free one is just fine. All right, now once you have this thing, there are things you can set on here, but the really important things, there's really two important things here. If I click on overview right here, I'll see one thing is the endpoint. We want to hang on to that endpoint right here. It's West US, and every endpoint will be the same at https:// something.api.microsoft.com, etc. But except the region might be different. So depending on what region I selected on the creation page, that might change. I'll copy that right here, and in Notepad, I'll just save it right here. And then also the access keys right here. Now, these are super secret. Don't anybody else see your access keys, although I totally trust you guys, so I'm going to leave it right here. Actually, I'll delete this when I'm done. And I'll copy one of those. There are two keys here. They behave exactly the same. The reason there are two is because if they somehow get compromised, somebody sees them, you can regenerate them. And because it takes a finite amount of time to, a non-zero amount of time to regenerate, you can switch over and use the other key while the first one is regenerating. That's why there's two of them right here. So I'll make sure I have those two pieces of information right here. That's really what I need. And that's what goes here in the header, is my key right here. My URL is this bit right here. Those are why those two pieces are important here. That might actually not be West US. It might be eastus.api.cognitive, etc. All right. Now the other thing in the header is content type, and the content type specifies how am I going to send the image to the service. There's two broad ways to do that. One is I can send the image itself, and the other is that I can send a link to that image. I can send a URL pointing at that image. Now, the URL has to be out on the public web somewhere that Cognitive Service itself can get to it. But if I do that, then I can specify just a link. If I send the link, I want to set the content type to application/JSON, and then in the body of my request, I'll send some JSON that looks like this. URL : and then the actual URL that points to the image. If I want to send the image itself, I'll have to set the content type to either application/octet stream or multipart/form data, depending upon whether I'm going to send it as a submitted web form or as a programmatically send the bits from an application. So either one of those will work. You notice there are only certain formats that are supported. There's some limitations. It has to be less than 4 megabytes, and it has to be at least this size. So there are some limitations about the image that you can do. And that's it. I'm going to post to a URL. In the URL, I'll contain all of my parameters, my query string parameters. In the header, I'll include these two bits of information, one of which I have to get from Azure. And in the body, I'll either send the image itself or this JSON pointing to the image. Once I send that, I'll get a response back. That's the way that HTTP works. I send a request and a response. And HTTP responses, they have a code and they have a status code in them. If you get a status code of 200, that's good. Anything that starts with 200 is okay. And if that comes back, you'll get some JSON that looks pretty much like this. It'll have an array of categories in here. It'll have, if you specified landmarks, those will be in here. If you specified you want to know about adult, then this data will be in here. If you said you want tags, then that information will be in there, and so on. You can parse this out to your heart's content. Some of these things are codes, like for example, the clip art has a code 0 through 3, which says is it non-clip art, ambiguous, normal, etc. And if it's a line drawing, it's just a true-false thing. So some of those things you have to look up a little bit, but it's all pretty straightforward. It's mostly human readable. all that color information, brown and black. So we don't actually see the image that was set in here, but apparently it is a picture of Satya Nadella sitting on a bench in front of there's Satya Nadella right here in front of the Forbidden City. So we could look at this and figure out what that picture was, but they don't show it to us. Now it could be there's an error. Maybe you made a mistake, or maybe the service is down, or something. And here's some common errors right here. Maybe you pointed that you gave it a URL that either doesn't exist or it's behind some password or a firewall or something like that. Maybe you put something internal to your organization. I can see it, but cognitive services can't. Maybe the format is wrong. You try to send some proprietary image, or maybe the size is wrong. It's more than 4 megabytes. So maybe you misspelled one of the query string parameters. This one is interesting here. So child pornography is not allowed. It won't even analyze it. If you get something like that, and so on. So a lot of these are just spelling errors that pretty common, pretty easy to make. And so if you did that, you'll get some kind of a 400 error back. You will get the code back, and you'll get a brief description of that error. So you can handle that in your code. 415 is specifically unsupported media. 500, these are server-side errors. If there's a problem with a service on here, one common one is you might get an authentication error. I think it's a 401. Maybe you put either your key in wrong, or maybe the URL is wrong. The key and the URL have to both match what's here in this service. So that's important to know. All these things here. Let's see, and you can see some of these things here, the code and the message, blah, 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 blah. All right, so that's what it comes back. Now you're thinking, I'm a developer. I want to start writing. I want to do this right away. How do I do it? Well, what language do you want to write it in? It's REST, it's HTTP, it's JSON. These are all standard. So even though Microsoft is hosting this, we don't care. We can write it in any one of these languages as long as the language can support HTTP and make a web request, read some JSON back. All these things, which are pretty much any language, any platform, any framework, any operating system can support those things. So we have lots of flexibilities how to do this. And if you happen to be using curl or C# or Java or JavaScript, Objective-C, PHP, Python, any one of these, here's sample code to do that. So if I want to just download curl and start using it from here, there's the code to send this right here. Now they don't show the body. You'll have to add the body and your key right here, but this is code to get you started. If I want to write a C# application, there it is right there. There's the code to do it. Java, JavaScript. I don't really know anything about PHP, but if somebody came to me and says, you must write a PHP application to analyze this image, well, this is where I'd start, and I would pretend like I wrote it all myself, but I'd really be copying all that stuff here. You want to try it out? That's what these links right here are for. If I come in here, West US, and I want to choose West US because that's where my key that I created was. I created it in the West US. I can go right to here, and I can specify things like, let's see, let's go with description, and what details do I want to add? Doesn't really matter. Here, what language, headers, content type, my key. Let's use this key right here. Right. Copy that, paste it in there. And then for a URL, let's see, I have a URL right here. It's a picture of a boat. So if I go back to here, I'll replace this example URL, which doesn't really exist, with that. There's my body. And then I'm going to do this right here. So if I wanted to go into Postman or Fiddler or something like that, this is the URL right here that I'm going to use. You can see that the query string parameters are all set in here. It's a post to that URL. Here's some header information. They blocked out my key. There's the body right here. So I could do this whole thing in Postman using the same information. I'll click on send. It'll send it out. Hopefully I get a 200 back. I did. So that means it was all good. Everything was good, and I got some information back. So there are no celebrities in here, but I did get a description: water, outdoor, boat, small, mountain, a small boat in a body of water. It's 97% sure that's what it is. And yeah, in fact, that is a small boat in a body of water, etc. All this information is in here, and it all came back, and I could parse that out in my application. And that's it. That's a good stopping point right here, showing you how this thing works, how you can use computer vision using the REST API and even some sample code to get you started, and this little test harness right here. In the next video, I'll show you actually how to use that in code using JavaScript and C#. This is David. Thank you for watching.